their attention elsewhere. They want to know if there was a secret in David's personal life that led to his murder.
2 shots through the head, dousing with gasoline and set on fire. This was a crime of rage.
Investigators believe the 2 suspects they're looking for were involved in a fatal lover's triangle with their victim.
We came up with the working theory that it was a woman and a man. The woman had been involved sexually with David Stevens, and the man somehow involved with the woman.
Police believe that whoever buzzed David in the middle of the night lured him out of his apartment to his death. But there are no witnesses to identify his mysterious caller. If David had a secret lover, his friend Carl had no clue.
We always joked with David and told him he was the only California virgin that we knew. And it was accurate. David did not date a lot. He spent most of his time working. Other than that, we were out hanging out, partying. He would meet girls, he would talk to them, but it generally didn't go much further than that.
David spent a lot of time with Carl, who introduced him to San Diego nightlife and the club scene downtown. One place they frequented was an upscale adult entertainment club called Dancers.
We would stop by there once a week. David would get an opportunity to talk to the girls. He would buy 1 beer, he would sip on it all evening long.
Carl tells investigators he suspects that there might be some connection between dancers at the club and David's death.
They had asked me if I knew of any female that would have been at David's apartment. And quite frankly, I had no clue. If there was a female, I was fairly certain that would have been one of the dancers from the club that we went to. Because other than that, I didn't know David was having a relationship with any female.
The regular dancers at the club remember David and his attempts to make friends.
I make it a rule to never date my clients.
Yeah, that's the #1 rule.
Usually sat at the bar with his boss. Didn't really get any lap dances or any kind of activity like that.
The dancers actually spoke very highly of David. He was always polite and he was always courteous to them.
The detectives also learned that David began coming to the club alone.
I was always concerned about him going there by himself. I didn't want him to go in and be taken advantage of.
They wonder if David had a run-in with one of the dancers' boyfriends. The women hint that David had a thing for a dancer who came and went from the club. They know her only by her stage name, India.
I mean, he watches us all, but
Yeah, but
he's got eyes for India.
well, you know, he's here for India.
Are they dating, or he just comes in to see her?
I'm sure they hook up.
They hook up.
Definitely.
By law, exotic dancers in San Diego have their prints on file at the police department. None of the dancers at the club has prints that match the ones left in David's apartment.
I found when I interviewed the dancers that they were very upfront. Innocent people only know one story, and they only know the truth, and that's all they ever tell. But they weren't involved, and that's what they told us, and we were able to corroborate that out.
The case is frustrating. Months into the investigation, despite the DNA evidence and the fingerprints, there are no viable leads to a suspect.
They had nothing.
Sergeant Martin.
A reporter called Sergeant Martin and asked him where the case was, and Sergeant Martin said, quote, "We're stumped," end quote.
Deeply shaken by David's death, his family is angered by the lack of progress.
And I'm wanting closure on this thing so we can go about our lives. Our family is suffering a lot on this.
David's family was so devastated by his death. They wanted answers. They wanted to know why his murder hadn't been solved, and we all did too.
As the investigation grows cold, family members become very frustrated with the police. I mean, I understand their loved one's gone. They think that we've lost interest. Well, sometimes we just don't have the leads to run down.
But their luck turns in March of 1999. Investigators finally track down the exotic dancer known as India. She says she did occasionally go out with David in the fall of 1998.
Wasn't my type.
She'd gone to breakfast with him a couple times, and I think she may have even gone out on a date with him. They weren't exclusive, they certainly weren't romantic. She spoke highly of him. She said he was always very nice, very polite, but it just wasn't meant to be.
The dancer cooperates, but neither her DNA nor her fingerprints matches those of the woman in David's apartment.
She was clearly not the woman we were looking for.
Coming up, a Crime Stoppers tip leads to a suspect with a stranger-than-fiction motive.
This is like something out of a Hollywood movie. Could this have happened? Is this some kind of a cult murder thing?
One year after David Stevens was killed, his murder remains unsolved.
Case got very cold.
Yes.
There was nothing we could prove there, nothing that really led us down the path any closer to the suspect.
Every clue, everything that we thought would make a difference ended up just being a brick wall.
The mystery woman he had a tryst with the night he was killed remains anonymous. A caller ID box found in his apartment recorded the numbers of more than 30 callers. Police discovered most of them were employees. Investigators talked to them, but learned nothing new.
I don't really remember, but I might have called him around Christmas time for my hours.
So we didn't really have anything that would point the finger at anybody off of the phone there because there was nothing out of the ordinary.
Reconstructing the timeline of David's last night, detectives learned that he had let all his employees go early.
I noticed that you've got some leftover Christmas shopping still to get done. Why don't we get out a couple hours early? Sound good?
Business was slow because of the holidays. But could he have had an ulterior motive? Was he planning a rendezvous with a woman he didn't want any of his employees to see? Scrambling for answers, detectives arranged for Crime Stoppers to run a segment on the David Stevens case and air it on the local news right after the 2001 Super Bowl. And they get a hit.
Detective Young.
An unidentified male caller says a woman told him she knows who killed David Stevens.
He stated, go contact Kathy Newkirk. That Kathy Newkirk knew a female and a male who confessed to her to killing David Stevens.
The tipster adds that the female connected to the homicide is a dancer named India. The name immediately rings a bell with detectives.
I interviewed her in March of 1999, right here. I interviewed her at the strip club, Dancers.
India is the dancer who'd gone out with David briefly and who had checked out 2 years earlier in 1999. Her fingerprints didn't match the ones on David's headboard. Now investigators want to talk to Kathy Newkirk, the woman pointing a finger at her.
Kathy Newkirk?
Yes.
In Kathy Newkirk's apartment, detectives notice something unusual.
So what is up with the fruit and candles there?
I practice Santeria. It's my shrine. You want to have a seat?
She tells us right up front that she's into Santeria and that she, in effect, is like a lay priestess.
Santeria is an African-based religion related to voodoo.
She tells us that the dancer is also into Santeria.
Kathy tells them she and India were once lovers, but India left her for a man. Kathy knew India had also dated David. She says that made India's boyfriend angry, and he killed David in a jealous rage.
The dancer came to her and said, "We killed this person, what do we do with them?" Kathy then says to the dancer, "Your sign is fire." So fire is the way that you need to address this, and that she directs them to burn the body and burn it in the car.
Although Kathy's story seems outlandish, investigators have long believed that David was killed because he was part of a lover's triangle. India, her boyfriend, and David. That makes 3. But if the police are right, the female DNA and fingerprints in his apartment should belong to the woman in the fatal trio. India's hadn't been a match.
It was intriguing that she named someone that we interviewed early on in the investigation, but yet again, it was perplexing because the physical evidence had cleared her out.
Now investigators wonder if they overlooked something.
It was one of those things where you were torn. This is so far-fetched, it can't be true, but yet there's some facts that could.
It had a lot more validity than anything we'd had so far. He might have been murdered as a part of these voodoo ceremonies or a conflict that arose out of those.
This is like something out of a Hollywood movie. Really, could this have happened? Is this some kind of occult murder thing?
India is now working as a stripper in Las Vegas. They ask Kathy to make a recorded call to India to see if she'll back up her claims. But Kathy refuses.
I can't call him.
Over time, Kathy's story keeps changing.
Initially, it was the boyfriend killed him out of jealousy, and then the 2 of them killed David because they were involved in some kind of illicit drugs. So the story changed, I think, somewhat remarkably each time we talked to her.
For the prosecutor on the case, the pieces don't fit the puzzle.
They fit the framework, but the pieces were wrong.
Not the right people, I'm sorry. You gotta keep looking.
But the break that finally cracks the case comes out of the blue. It starts with a call straight to the homicide division. A young woman named Nee Norn has quite a story to tell.
Sergeant?
Yeah.
We just got a call from a Nee Norn saying that she thinks she knows who killed David Stevens.
Well, grab John and go get her.
Yes, sir.
Coming up, a stunning story of love and betrayal. Nearly 3 years after David Stevens' brutal murder, detectives usher a young woman named Nee Norn into an interrogation room at San Diego Police Headquarters.
Apparently, she had told one of her coworkers that she was in an abusive relationship, wanted out, and she had this secret that she had been carrying around for years. So she was convinced by this coworker to call police, and she did.
Soon after meeting her, the police realized they've spoken to this woman before. Early in the investigation, she'd told them she had called David to ask about her work schedule the night he was killed. Now she admits she lied about that.
David and I met at Perfect Match. We worked together, and we liked each other. I didn't want my boyfriend to know.
She tells detectives a strange and terrible tale.
Perfect Match, this is David.
In December of 1998, Nee Norn had been working part-time at Perfect Match for only a few months.
There was really nothing that stood out about her. She's a very pretty young lady, did a good job. All of the girls in that room respected David, enjoyed working for him, and she was no different.
Unbeknownst to Carl, though, a shared attraction was growing between David and Nee.
She talked about what a good guy he was and how gentle he was with her and sweet, and that she liked him. He started developing a bit of a crush, and it was probably mutual.
David was Nee's secret Santa at the office, and he left her little presents.